Time is the most precious commodity on earth. It's something you can't necessarily buy, and once it's gone, you can't buy it back. Um, I have so many ideas and concepts that I really, really want to get out there to the world. And my biggest issue is time, unfortunately. I appreciate platform, and my platforms are growing, and I'm very appreciative of that. And I'm hoping that over time, my platforms will get much, much bigger because outside of time is platform. Doesn't matter what you're trying to achieve in your life. You can be a school teacher, you can be a police officer, you can be a politician, you can be an actor, you can be a singer. If you want true success, you need a huge platform. And most people try to gain the attention of huge platforms, but some people like myself are trying to build their own huge platforms because, like I said, I've got a lot of ideas. I really want to liberate the minds of so many people that I feel are plugged into systems that are very oppressive to them, systems that are pumping them full of marketing material that lead to them being fat, being addicted to prescription drugs, that destroy their families without them seeing, um, and that allow the elite to control them to their own ends and means, and not necessarily for the benefit of the people themselves. I have said before that my goal is to colonize as many minds as possible, unplug them from the systems that they plugged into, and plug them into my system, which is essentially my way of thinking, my worldview, and arguably penalism. I've written down, or every now and then when I'm sparked by idea, I write down these notes of the things I want to talk about, and weeks and months go by without me never getting to go through some of these things. So just for the interest of deleting some of these things, I'm gonna try and go through the notes that I've got, or it's like short phrases, and maybe do that within like a 30-minute window, so that I can at least tick them off. And maybe in time I will rehash these things or I'll unpack them in greater detail. Just want to remove 2 points here that I've sorted out. Okay. Yeah, let me actually just go through them. Please excuse me and please allow me. This is not really going to be organized, but it's just me almost taking my notes and just thinking out loud. And you guys, unfortunately, are going to be the recipients of some of my thoughts. The first one is iLobolo history. A lot of people don't know the history of iLobolo. iLobolo, for people that don't know, is what English describes as a bride price. This is actually not really what it is. Back in the day, before colonizers came to Africa and South Africa in particular, there was a certain way that Africans would marry each other. And it had to do with families coming together, the girl's side of the family, in particular her father and his brothers, and then the boy's side of the family, and in particular his father and his brothers. They would come together as families and discuss the concept of the two children getting married to each other, and obviously over time having children together, and the union of these two families. And in that conversation, part of it would be something called iLobolo. And iLobolo used to be, and this is part of the history, iLobolo used to be gifts that the boy side of the family would give to the girl side of the family for many reasons. Part of it being, it's always nice to give a gift as a good gesture because it allows people to be happy and to see that you're not here to fight. Number two, it would be you normally bringing something of value from wherever you come from. So if we value horses, we would bring you a beautiful horse. If we value cows, bring a cow. If we are known maize farmers or butternut farmers, we would bring our prized maize and butternut. If we were great at beadwork, we would bring our greatest beadwork. If we were great at making clothing, whatever we valued, we would bring. In the modern world, of course, that is what we call money. In that, later on, one of the lords, Theophilus Shepstone, came through and then defined iLobolo into a specific price in cattle, 10, 11 cattle, of which each cow had its own meaning. And maybe when I do the unpacking of iLobolo history, I will go and do the research on each and every cow and what it meant. Fast forward to today, we still have those 10, 11 cows. Some people take it down to 5, and then they price each cow in monetary terms. So one cow could be 2,000 Rand, another cow could be 5,000, one cow could be 10. And then you accumulate these 10, 11 cows or these 5 cows to come up with a 30,000 Rand a month, 50,000 Rand amount, for some people, all the way up to 100,000 Rand amount. And today, that money is meant to be used for the benefit of the wedding. Some of it goes into being a gift for the girl's family, but the big chunk of it is meant to go to the wedding, of which back in the day when it was cattle, some of the cattle would be slaughtered in the celebration and the feast. But because a lot of black people today are struggling financially, a lot of families take this money for themselves and they spend it on their own things. And the family or the boy, normally, because it wouldn't be his father and his uncles anymore, it would be the boys, myself, my money, maybe going to take out a loan from the bank. I will pay iLobolo, and then after that, I will still have to take out another loan to pay for the wedding. And that principle and the concept of iLobolo has kind of lost its meaning. So I would like at some point to unpack iLobolo, where it comes from, what it meant, how it has morphed, what it is today, and how I believe personally that so many black people have lost the meaning of iLobolo, and how they can go back to the principle and then find a modern take on it that ensures that it brings families together, that ensures that the man and the woman get to have a happy union, and that the families are involved in this marriage that has been built. So I can remove that for now. But it is something that I will raise at some point, and I want to do it in greater detail and be a bit more technical and a bit more specific. Another note I've got here is why you can't stop dating new people. One of the conversations I have in some of the circles I'm in today is our habits, and the fact that a lot of our habits are the reason why we live really bad lives. So if you grew up at home and your parents every week would buy takeaways, slab chips and Russians, KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, chicken licken, pizza, burgers, as an example, every week, in your mind, in your body, you get accustomed to those habits to a point where when you're older, your body and your mind will have built this template and this blueprint of every week we must buy takeaways. And it almost becomes second nature. Even at times when you're trying to be healthy, you'll be like, but growing up, I always had this habit. Could be exercise, could be a good habit. Arnold Schwarzenegger talks about the fact that his father would make them do push-ups and squats and exercise every morning before breakfast. If you haven't done your exercise, you don't get to eat. And those become positive habits that you inculcate into your children to a point where even when you're older, before you eat breakfast, you just find yourself gymming because you're like, this is what I've always done my whole life. Now, I believe a similar thing happens when it comes to dating and relationships and marriage. You get so accustomed to habits that by the time you are meant to commit to someone for life, your body and your mind are on this program of routine where you can no longer realistically stick to that person because the habits are ingrained. So many of us know this idea of a new, like a new car smell. There's like a new relationship smell and feeling. You've just seen this girl and she's taking your breath away, and you happen to pluck up the courage to go and speak to her, and then she gives you her phone number, and the whole night you guys are just texting till 3 o'clock in the morning. You pass out at 3 o'clock. As soon as you wake up at 6, you can't wait to read the messages she sent. Back in the day, it used to be love letters. You go and you give a love letter, and then you can't wait for this person to respond. And for girls back in the day, they would take their perfume and spray the paper with their perfume so that when you open the love letter, you kind of smell her. So these cute things that we do. And look, obviously a smell comes with its own pheromones. So I have said in the circles that I'm in that if you do not marry and commit to the first person you date, let's say when you're 16, realistically, if you don't commit to that person, you are already breaking yourself from a commitment routine perspective. Because from the second person that you date, you are now beginning the pattern of leaving relationships and joining new ones. And the more people you break up with and date, the more your body and your mind starts priming this concept to a point where I look at my life. I realized over a 15-year period, my relationships wouldn't last beyond 3 to 4 years. It wasn't intentional. It was me just looking in retrospect and saying, for some weird reason, after 3-4 years, things start going sideways. And it's almost like that is the routine that my mind has trained itself. So when I meet, let's say, a new lady, I can almost preempt, or a statistician can be like, look at what's going to happen after 3 years. Something's going to happen. It's going to be an excuse. There's going to be a new woman. Something is going, because my body has now trained itself into this routine. And a lot of people get so obsessed with this concept of a new relationship that they crave it. Because after the new relationship experience, call it the honeymoon phase, could be a few weeks, could be a few months. After that, your relationship plateaus and the person becomes boring and mediocre. And that's when the real work is supposed to start. But for a whole lot of other people, that's when they're like, this person is no longer the same. They're not buying me flowers like they used to. We don't text all night like we used to. And then they crave that in a new person. And if you meet a new person, you start again. But now you are training your mind and your body to get addicted to this thing. So you will constantly go and chase for that new relationship feeling. And for people that constantly date in 2-year periods, 6-month periods, by the time you get married, let's say you started dating at 16, by the time you get married at 32, your body's become so used to breaking up and getting into new relationships that it's all it knows. So you'll get married. After 2 years, which is what your body's used to, you will start fighting with your partner. It could be about money, it could be about infidelity, it could be about children, doesn't matter. But because you are married, you will try and hold on for maybe another year, 2 years. But eventually your habits in your mind will break whatever attempt you're trying, because this is what you've trained yourself into. And for people that want to change this is where the power of therapy comes in, where you're like, look, this is kind of what's been happening in my relationships in the past. I need to now be careful of the triggers. I've been with this lady for almost 2 years. I now need to manage that she's frustrating me, that I've met a new lady. These are the reasons that I would normally leave other relationships. And how do we manage that? And now you need to start building a new habit. There are people that in the way they date, in the way they have relationships and get married, you literally get married a virgin. So the first person you have sex with is the last person you have sex with. So you don't build this habit of, and especially for females, being able to compare dick sizes and sexual experiences. You can't compare, so you can't crave. If you've had sex as a woman, as an example, if you've had sex with 15 different men, by the time you get married, you've got a portfolio of 15 penises, you've got a portfolio of 15 sexual encounters. And you may at some point crave a certain experience because it's what you've been exposed to. If you don't get exposed to that, you will never crave it because you don't know it. And the danger in a lot of our relationships today is we date liberally. And I've said before that the entry and the exit into relationships is so low. You don't have to be with a girl for 5 years. You don't have to go and ask for her father's permission to take her out for coffee. Therefore, it is so easy to get in. You meet a girl at a club, you guys go home. The next day, now that you've had sex with her, there's nothing holding you back. You can let her go and never speak to her again. The entry and exit into relationships and intimacy is so low. We've lived this liberal life and you begin building these habits. That's why for a lot of guys, if they are used to sleeping with different girls every other week, even after they get married, their mind and body habits will continue. So they're married, but they will keep sleeping with women because that's what their body and their minds are used to. And if you want to break that, they need to, almost like an addiction, you need to go to rehab or go cold turkey. That means, for example, this guy who's marrying you must maybe go celibate for 6 months to break or to try break this habit of, I always used to sleep with a new girl every 3 weeks. And for me to change this habit, I need to go through something traumatic to kind of change the way my body and my mind operates. So I think my note was something to do around something like that. It's a very detailed conversation and it's got to do with the quality of relationships we have today. Why our marriages fail, why our homes are broken, why people don't stop cheating, specifically men, etc., etc., etc. And look, men even slightly historically have been used to sleeping with more than one woman. Today, a lot of women, especially of my generation and younger, are getting used to having a liberal type of intimacy like men before. So if a guy has slept with 10 women, there's a chance that the girl he's with has maybe slept with like 7 guys. So we're almost equal. And if a girl is getting used to sleeping with different men on a regular basis, it only holds that even after she gets married, her body and her mind are going to carry on in those habits. She might hold off for a while, but after a while, her old habits are going to kick in. South African National Blood Service is not paying. I've made a couple of videos about this before, and I'm gonna make more videos about it because I would like to be one of the people that is quoted when the legislation changes. Laws are created by human beings, normally driven by lobby groups. What that means is a collection of people will come together, agree that a certain law is oppressive or needs to be changed, and then they will begin the process of approaching politicians, the courts, and saying, we would like to contest this law. And then there's a process, and sometimes it needs money, and sometimes it needs some type of campaigning or activism to get buy-in from so many other people to say, we do not agree with this law and we feel it should be changed. So I would like to be one of the people that is involved in changing the law for the South African National Blood Services. Blood is a very precious commodity, and when people have been in accidents, if people have given birth and they've lost a lot of blood, etc., they need blood. And in South Africa, we donate blood to the South African National Blood Services, and they collect this blood, they test it, they store it, and when people need it, they then sell this blood to private and public hospitals who then sell it over to patients. It's a very expensive process. I think to government hospitals, the South African National Blood Services sells a pint for about 3,000 Rand, as an example, 3,000 Rand. The government obviously then administers it for free to patients in public hospitals. But the doctors and the nurses in that value chain will get paid. And of course, there will be other storage and those kind of things that will require cost. In private healthcare, they'll sell for a bit more expensive, maybe like 4,000 Rand for a pint. And then the private hospital will then unsell it to the private healthcare patient for maybe 7,000 or more per pint. And then the doctors and the nurses and the storage, everyone gets paid. The donor does not get paid. And the argument is, look, we're a non-profit organization. We can't afford to pay people. But the reality is these people sell the blood that you give to them for free. And my only request has been that maybe 100 Rand for every pint that is given a green tick to say it's been tested, it's been looked at, this is good blood, it's good to go, it will be sold. Or maybe even on the day that it's sold, because they've got your ID number, they've got you in the database, they know that this is your pint of blood. The day they sell that blood to government or to private healthcare, 100 Rand from that sale comes into your account. It will incentivize a lot of the people who donate blood to be like, at least I'll use the 100 Rand to travel to and from the blood donor space, etc., etc. I've heard people say silly things like, yeah, but many people will then, who are poor, will go and want to donate all the time. There are very easy systems for that. If you can maybe only donate once a month, as an example, or once every 2 months, they will have you on the database. So as soon as you come in and you're like, I donated last week, they'll say, oh, unfortunately, you can only donate again in a month or 2 months. That's easy quality control. If ever the quality of your blood is not good, they will have tested it. And the day you come the next time, they will tell you, unfortunately, we suggest you go and see a healthcare practitioner, but we cannot accept your blood. We've tested it and we feel it is not the type of blood that we're looking for. Very easy. Very, very easy. Something that really disturbed me when John Perlman brought on Dr. Karen van den Berg on his show on 702 was she said something so derogatory and so many people didn't pick up on it. This concept that she said, if we incentivize blood donor, we will get a lot of undesirable people coming to donate blood. All I was hearing there is poor, black, squatter camp township dwellers, which I thought was very, very problematic because it almost means we only want blood from rich people. We only want people in the suburbs who eat well, who can afford to come and donate blood, and we don't want blood from poor, dirty, black. That is very wrong for many reasons. One of them being poor black people from squatter camps, from townships, also need blood at some point in government hospitals. So it would make sense for some of them to donate blood, as an example. Number two, the blood does get tested. So if ever the blood is not good, you can let people know on an individual basis. This type of discrimination for me, I think, is something that needs to be looked at as well. That you only want well-off people to donate the blood. What does that say about the type of organization that the South African National Blood Services is? But for me, the more important thing is, number one, compensating good blood donors to incentivize blood donation. Number one. Number two, changing the laws. Changing the laws that don't allow people that donate blood, people that donate sperm, people that donate eggs and other organs to be compensated fairly. There are systems. I really believe there are systems that can be put in place to make sure that people don't abuse it. But it cannot be that the South African National Blood Services makes so much money from selling blood. Obviously, our government takes our tax money for this blood they give away for free. And then private healthcare has to take money from medical aid and people's hard-earned to then sell the blood onto the patient. And another very important thing is people that donate blood should be able to get blood for free the day they need it. And currently that is not the case. So those are some of the things that we need to discuss. And those are some of the laws that we really, really need to change. In other parts of the world, blood donors, sperm donors, egg donors get paid comfortably. So it's not like this would be something new and taboo in the world. Let me see what else I'm going to cover before I shut down. Academics mustn't limit your dreams. I think it's very important. I may have made a video about this in the past. Walking around neighborhoods that have very expensive homes and trying to zoom into each family and figuring out how they made their money, how they became rich and how they were able to afford that home. You will find many stories. Basic story could be high earning professional, surgeon, top paid engineer, top paid lawyer, a chartered accountant who's a senior manager or an executive somewhere, an actuary, a high paid professional. To be a high paid professional, or let's say high paid professionals are getting 100,000 to 200,000 Rand a month as a salary. To become that, you need to have gotten good marks at school, specifically in maths and science, maybe some other subjects. And then you must have gone to a tertiary institution, a good university, where you went and you studied and you qualified, at least from a tertiary perspective. And then you went to do your articles or you interned. And then you became this professional. And then in your career, you moved up the ranks until you earned what you are earning now. That is one way. Another way to get into that neighborhood with expensive homes is to become a super athlete. So it could be playing for Bafana Bafana, the national soccer team. Could be playing for the Springboks, the national rugby team. Could be playing for the Proteas, the national cricket team. Unfortunately, a lot of the other sporting codes don't pay that much money. So you have to be a super athlete. Obviously, if you're in America, it could be basketball. Maybe for some people, if you're a sprinter somewhere. But you have to be a super athlete. And if you're a super athlete with your endorsements and the competitions you win, etc., you could be earning 200,000, 300,000 Rand a month. And that then allows you. And you can go back and say, look, from when this person was 12, from when they were 16, people already saw they were talented. They were tall, they were muscular, they were fast, they were fit. And they got picked up and then they ended up joining a professional outfit somewhere. And they played so well that they attracted a crowd and they made money from that and from endorsement deals. That's the one way. Another way could be, we'll call it politics and political services, tenders, procurement. So you could find that someone is making 200,000 a month and it's because they got into politics. I mean, if you're a member of parliament today, which is the highest level before you get to Speaker of Parliament, Deputy President, Minister, President, just a member of parliament, you're looking at about 100,000 Rand a month gross income. By the time you get to Minister, President, you're looking at maybe 200. The president, I think, earns 3 million Rand a year, so you can do the maths. 150 to 200 and just over 200,000 Rand a month for them at that level. So you can be earning a salary as a politician, and there's a way to become a politician. You join a political party, you do some activism, you campaign, and in that political party, you get voted up the ranks until at elections, national elections, when they are placing parliamentary seats, you get your seat. And in that seat, you can maybe become a minister, or Speaker of Parliament, and you get paid accordingly. Or political services, which is tenders. And again, this is now business. You're supplying government, whether through the Department of Education, Health, it could be the policing, it could be social development, it doesn't matter. But you are supplying government with toilet paper, with cleaning, with security. Maybe you are in construction, you help them build hospitals or refurbish hospitals, you build schools, etc., etc. And your company is making up quite a bit of money from servicing government. And then in that company, you get to keep profit, or you pay your salary of about 100, 200,000 Rand a month, which allows you to then live in the same neighborhood. Another option could be business, of course. And the business could be first generation or it could be multiple generations. So you start a business outside of, let's say, politics. You start a restaurant. And in that restaurant, within 10 years, so many people love your gourmet dishes. It's high end. Your restaurant's making R1 million a month. And from that R1 million a month, you draw a salary of 100, 150, 200,000 Rand a month. And that allows you to then live there. It could be generational. Your grandfather started a small mini market in a township somewhere. And then your father was raised in that business and he ended up multiplying these mini markets times 5 in that same township. And from the township, your father moved to the suburbs and he was making money while living in the suburbs. And now that you are third generation, you are expanding even further. And you've got 20 stores and you've been able to afford a house in this expensive neighborhood. That's one of the ways. One of the ways we don't speak about, I'm going to leave this one for last, but I wanted to highlight that academics is not the beginning and end of success. And we need to raise children that understand that academics is merely one path to making a lot of money and living a good quality life. Athleticism is very viable if your child is talented. Business, if your child can start very, very early at a very young age to sell, to understand the nitty-gritties of business, it could be investing, studying stocks, etc. That's another way. I didn't mention entertainment, sorry. If you can add entertainment, your child could be an actor, your child could be a singer. And in that space, whether they are in front of the camera or maybe part of production, they are the people that put together events. They are the people that make movies, even though they don't act. So the entertainment industry is yet another space where your child could be making 200,000 Rand a month. They are a DJ like Black Coffee or Prince KB. They are an actor, someone like Tusombedu. They could be a singer. Ulira, Uzonke, these singers that make a lot of money. So your child could be in entertainment. So that raw talent of singing, dancing, etc. is but another way. And if your child is talented, you need to harness. We need to create these spaces in society where going to school and getting good marks cannot be the only indicator that you will be successful. We need to look at all the people that are earning well and then kind of work it back. And you can tell your child you can be a politician, you can be a entrepreneur, you can be an actor, you can be a singer, you can own production houses, you can do events, you can start a business, you can be an athlete. It is really up to you. Obviously, it would help to have a mix. So let's push a bit of academic, let's maybe push a bit of sports, and let's see if you've got any other talent in something else, maybe being a speaker, maybe being a singer, etc. And let's invest in these 3 things and see which ones are going to get you somewhere. Maybe you will win in all 3 of them. Maybe you will be Kanye West and you will make money in fashion and make money in music and make money in something else. So your child can do that as well. I'm leaving this last part because this one is very important and it touches on something very sensitive. I've sat and I've spoken to some of the rich people that I've met, in particular the white rich people who arguably it is said that they are the descendants of colonizers and apartheid leaders who built their wealth off the oppression and exploitation of black indigenous people in South Africa and Africa. The people that are rich, or a big chunk of the people that have become rich off slavery, colonization, exploitation, stealing resources, so to speak, today want new people who are trying to be rich to respect the rule of law. But the rule of law has been created in such a way that it almost discounts crimes of the past. As an example, put it very bluntly, I cannot build my wealth in the same way British colonizers did in this country, because if I did, I would be breaking the law and committing crimes, and I will be arrested. It will be crimes against humanity. I'll not be allowed to do certain things. There will be regulations that I'm breaking. Similar to the apartheid government. I cannot acquire land the way the apartheid government acquired land by shifting people off their land legally. So the laws today that we are meant to respect, they almost turn a blind eye and they ratify the crimes of the past to say you can keep your wealth that your ancestors built off crimes against humanity, conquering certain people, killing certain people, taking their resources and sending them abroad. You can keep that wealth. Anyone today who wants to build wealth must compete with you, but they cannot use the tactics that you and your forefathers used. I've explained to my rich friends that, do you think it is fair to expect young black children to be able to compete fairly in a space where you inherited your privilege and your wealth unfairly. And if they cannot compete fairly, why do you frown upon them committing crimes? Because your forefathers, to give you the wealth you have today, committed crimes. It's one of the arguments I've even made about certain Nigerians that travel around the world. You're a black Nigerian. You travel to a foreign country because you want a better life. You are poor in Nigeria. When you get there, you're not a professional, so you're not being given a work permit. So there's a chance that you even got to that country legally. You paid a bribe, they gave you a permit, and you're there, but you shouldn't be there. So already you're committing a crime. Number two, when you get there, because you're not a surgeon, because you're not an engineer, etc., you don't have this high-level skill, you have to start in dirt. You have to start by washing cars, helping people park their cars, walking dogs, etc. And a lot of people are not going to let you in. You can't start a business in those countries because you need a certain amount of money and there's certain regulations. So a lot of these Nigerian guys, and it's not just Nigerians, it's people from all nationalities, could be the Lebanese, could be Spanish people, etc. They go into these countries and they say, we will do the dirty work and the dirty businesses no one else wants to do, and sometimes that are a crime. So they will do selling of drugs. They will do very tragic human trafficking. They will run prostitution brothels. They will do gambling, illegal gambling, and many other such illegal. It could also be loans, under the radar, illegally loaning people money, etc., so that they can build a base of money. And once they have that base of money, they then clean it up. All of a sudden, this Nigerian that arrived 5 years ago, who was dirt poor, now owns a car wash. All of a sudden, he owns a car workshop where they fix cars. All of a sudden, he owns a tire business. All of a sudden, he owns a big hair salon that is selling hair pieces, or he sells a cell phone parts shop. Where did he get the money? He got it through this dirt, these crimes. And that's generally how a lot of people build their wealth. You can look at immigrants around the world, New York, America, parts of China, parts of Europe. When the immigrants arrive, because they are undesirable, they will do the dirty work that no one wants to do. And they will almost enslave themselves and they will commit crimes so that they can build a foundation. And on that foundation, they then clean it up and then they build legitimate businesses. So I speak to a lot of, especially rich white South Africans, and I explain to them that a lot of the politicians and their entrepreneur friends you're going to see are going to have to break laws to try and play in the mainstream economy, because if we are going to speak fair, they will never be able to compete fairly with you and your family, because you built your wealth. You guys own 1,000 hectares of land. You guys own 500 heads of cattle. You guys own 10 businesses. You guys own 30 properties. But it is because when your great-great-great-great-grandfather came here, he came at a time where the land was 5 cents for 100 hectares. He came at a time where black people were treated as third-class citizens and they couldn't compete. He came at a time where you could just take a pick and a shovel and a wheelbarrow and go and dig for gold or diamonds and export them abroad. He came at a time where the laws favored him being a white Englishman, as an example. And over the years, you guys have been able to be sent to good schools, to go and study overseas, to get exposed to international business, to get advantages, to have a great network. For the young black child that has to compete with your child, they don't have all these advantages. And if they're just going to compete academically, they might beat your child, which is already a tough ask because a lot of black children are not good in the English language. So they might win or they may not. But then after that, when they get to tertiary and after in real life, your child is plugging into a system that has been built over generations. This black child has to start from scratch. They kind of have to beg people to be seen. They have to beg your family for a job within this space, and they will always be limited because they are not your child. And they have to fight. For other kids who don't have those advantages, they're like, I want to be as successful as your child. And because I'm not academically gifted, because I'm not an athlete, I will do the dirty things that you call a crime. The law doesn't allow it, but it is the only way for me to compete fairly. And it becomes very ironic. It is very gaslighting to hear someone whose family are descendants of diamond traders, gold traders in this country, pointing fingers at a black child and saying, but that person is committing crime. They forcefully took over that land. They stole that thing. And you're like, but that's how your ancestors built your wealth. So I want to explain that there is a group of people who commit crimes. South Africa and the rest of the world, not just black people, white people from America, from Europe, even to this day, because they say, if you want us to respect the law and the regulations, we will never amount to anything. So in my example of the neighborhood where there are people living in great houses, in some of those homes are criminals who said, I do not tick all these boxes of these talents. So I will go and commit crimes because I also want to make 200,000 a month and be able to live in this nice neighborhood and send my kids to top schools. And it becomes a very detailed conversation we need to have, especially for Black Africans who find themselves poor and struggling and still treated like third class citizens on the African continent, to say to the world, if you guys are not going to allow us to compete fairly, and by that we're speaking about regulations such as Black economic empowerment, giving certain Black people grants and funds, if you're not going to allow us to compete fairly, you cannot jail us for committing crimes because you have built your wealth of crimes. The United States of America as a top nation has been built off the back of slavery and the slave trade and transporting Africans there to whip them and chain them for cotton. If you look in China, China has become great because it enslaved its own people from the days of Mao, where there are sweatshops, counterfeit goods, committing crimes. If you look at Europe, Europe in itself is just a crime scene of constant wars, conflicts, where people have fought each other over land, over resources, and at some point they fought even to colonize other nations. Portugal, Spain, France, Britain, to say, which land are you taking? You can't take this one will be mine. Going to enslave and oppress and exploit the people there. If you look at Belgium as a country and what King Leopold did to Zaire, which today is called the Democratic Republic of the Congo, some of these crimes are still happening today. We've got Glencore, a Swiss-based company, one of the largest, if not the largest, commodities trading company in the world, that pays bribes, that funds rebel groups, military rebel groups, that goes into countries and it commits the most heinous criminal activities. They got fined recently, and you're like, you guys have all the advantages of being white, of the privileges of colonization, etc., and yet you're still committing crimes. But you don't expect the people that have been oppressed and impoverished over the years to commit similar, if not worse, crimes so that they can play on a level field. It's a very complicated, nuanced, complex conversation, but it's a conversation we need to have. That you cannot expect me to compete with you fairly when you're not playing fair. So I will commit crimes just to try and be fair and equal to you. And you may not be committing crimes, but your ancestors did. And I will be the ancestor for my children to make sure that in future, your descendants and my descendants are on equal playing field. You cannot commit crimes, but I will commit crimes. And I would like that leeway to be able to commit crimes so that my family can get somewhere. I think I'll stop there with my notes. I've got about like another 15. I'll make another video to cover those in time. Pen you all the black pen. Have a great and blessed day. Cheers.